Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Sarjeet. You may be watching this in our Facebook group, Business Analyst and Scrum Master in Demand, or our YouTube channel. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have the pleasure of introducing Ben Tobin, who is a career coach who spent 20 years in the tech industry. He looks really, really young, you guys, but he's actually had work experience of 20 years and has who now helps people find successful fulfillment in their careers with an emphasis in software engineers and people with ADHD. So with that, Ben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our user group?
All right, thank you. Glad to be here. I'm spent a lot of time in tech since college, and was in a number of roles from tester to software developer. Uh, uh, Worked in ops for a while, then as a manager, worked for Amazon for 10 years, and then found my discovered kind of my calling to help people through these kinds of careers, and to um, to work one-on-one primarily with people, and help them find the success that they're aiming for.
That's awesome. So you said you started in various roles, like a QA analyst. What did you do in college? You know, sometimes a lot of my audience sometimes struggles with figuring out what to do in college. So tell me what your path looked like from leading from, college to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to work with computers, so computer science just seemed like the obvious choice for me.
Mhm.
And I started working as a tester while I was in college,
Okay.
and then when I graduated, they sort of uh, moved me over to programming and said, "Okay, well, you got this, you got the piece of paper, and you're a programmer now."
Okay. And that was it.
That was it. It doesn't really work that way most of the time now. But I was in a small town in Montana, in
Uh-huh.
the only software company in town at the time. So
Okay.
it was, and they kind of had some old school uh, stuff going on back then.
Awesome. So I know that now folks have a much harder time. We see lots of people with comp sci degrees, and they're struggling to land their first gigs.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in the market? What would you recommend to somebody that is having that struggle?
Ooh, yeah. It is tough out there, especially uh, for new grads. It's so tough. Many companies have stopped or almost stopped even hiring people right out of college because there's so many people with experience in the job market.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, the roles are out there. There are some, but you have to find ways to stand out, or you need to be able to spin the the experiences that you have had to come across more as as the experience that they're looking for.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and there's some ethical and reasonable ways to do that if you happen to have the if you've worked on projects, especially
Hmm.
with other people and
Okay.
things like that.
That's awesome. All right, so let's get to talk about what you do now and what you find passion in. So sounds like you've gone through the whole trenches, QA, you worked as a developer for many years for Amazon. So first, before we dive into your questions, how was it working for Amazon?
I actually, for the most part, I liked it a lot. I mean, I worked on many different teams. Some were better than others. There were some that really were exhausting and rough. But it's such a big company that uh, if you if you really look out for yourself and um, uh, and move when you're in a in a situation that's not right for you, you can really find some great people. And I was also just very lucky in that I had some amazing managers early on who uh, helped me figure out how to thrive in that environment. And that's a big part of what made it important for me to help other people,
Mhm.
I wanted to pass that along. I saw some people struggling, and I found that I really enjoyed helping people navigate all that.
That's awesome. All right, so tell us what you do now. What is your passion today?
Yeah. Today I work with a lot of the people I work with are software engineers, but not all of them. Many of the others are in tech, but again, not all of them. Mostly I'm working with people who are trying to figure out what's right for them in their future.
Mhm.
Sometimes people come to me with some very specific things like, this is my goal. I know how to get there. I need a partner who can help me make sure I do it, to help me create the plan and execute on it. And other folks come much earlier in that. Sometimes folks come to me with something as vague as, I'm good at my job, but I'm unhappy and I don't know what to do with that. And so we work on figuring that out. And I also work with a lot of people who are just struggling in the job market, trying to land a job. And um, and so we work on ways to shine, to stand out, to
Mhm.
interview well in those specific kinds of interviews. And yeah,
So
all of
mostly software development or different roles within the tech world as well.
many roles in the tech world. I work with a lot of software developers, but I also work with project managers and program managers, some folks who have their sights set on product management,
Okay.
and a number of TPMs. Uh, and I actually worked with a good friend of mine, um, who wrote literally the first book on the role of TPM.
Okay.
And
And what is TPM? Just for
oh,
the audience to know what
uh,
TPM is.
Technical program manager.
Okay.
Yeah. The role is one that's still in the process of defining itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, but yeah, the I think it's a fascinating role. It is that middle ground between kind of project management, and program management, and developer.
Technical landscape, I would say, right? I think you mentioned that book to me before, and I definitely want to get my hands on it. And because for me, for my career, I've been a program manager, project manager on very complex projects, but mostly partnering with developers to make sure that, they take care of the technical aspects. I'm taking care of the overall program, but it would not be, it would be helpful to understand, what are some of the things that keep them up at night. I know what keeps me up at night, right? Because this is what I've done for so many years, and it comes second nature now. But it would be good to get into the head of a technical program manager and understand what are their, what's their checklist look like. So that's fascinating. That's awesome. Okay, so what about so I guess for folks out there watching, what is the typical progression look like? So for example, let's say a software developer comes to you, they love programming, but they're not necessarily feeling fulfilled. What are some of the avenues in your program or in your individual assessments? How do you figure out how to direct them or how to help them?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Uh, Really, our the first thing we focus on at that point is to start finding words for um, what the person needs, what uh, what their vision is of the future. Um, a lot of times, if I ask for if they have a vision, like, that's a problem. That's why I came to you. I don't have one. But people tend to have something. If we start
Mhm.
talking about, well, what are some qualities that are important, that, no matter where you end up, what are some things that you uh, want to be able to say about that role? What do you know about what fulfills you, what's important to you, how you like to work, things like that. We start building um, that incomplete picture, and then start comparing that to some directions that they could go, uh, and start figuring out, are you just at the wrong team, the wrong company, or are you in the wrong role? um, Yeah, and sometimes it's not even right to say that the role is wrong. It's just that, are you growing out of this role? Is this may have been the right role for you up till now, but
Mhm.
is something else going to be the right thing for you in the future? And uh, you know, that's that's worked very well to start finding that. Sometimes there are some big surprises that come up,
Mhm.
sometimes not.
Mhm. And I want to really touch upon what you just said a little bit earlier, Ben, which is it the wrong company, wrong culture? And, you know, there's, we don't talk about this a lot. There's a lot of toxic culture out there, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? And there may be some teams that are toxic and not the entire company. And you see that over and over again, right? You walk into companies and there's companies that gel, all departments, all teams gel really well together. And then there are areas that just are toxic, right? And so, that's really an important part to understand is if you're unhappy in your role and you feel like you're not fulfilled, it could just be the culture, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think for folks that are newer into their careers, since they've never been anywhere, they just don't know if that's the norm or not.
Yeah.
So how is there, since you kind of worked through that in your program, if people say, hey, Ben, I don't know if my culture is toxic, are there any examples that, that you can help define what a toxic culture is versus one that's not?
Yeah, it can be hard to define. Sometimes there can be examples, but usually in that situation, I'll ask the person just to kind of describe, what are some of the situations that are um making you feel the worst? What happened? What are people saying? Um, and how are people responding when you put your ideas or needs or
Mm-hmm.
things like that out there? And there can be some really stark differences. Sometimes people can ask me that, and what they bring to me, I don't see it, and I just say, some of that is, it sounds like that you may just not be a fit for what's kind of a high energy, high pressure workplace. But other times it's like, oh my goodness, people describe the behavior of their manager sometimes, and I'm like taken aback.
Yeah.
um and they don't realize that that's not normal because they have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Some of the questions that I'll ask is, okay, so when you need help, how is your management, how are your team members reactive to that?
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like some of the newer folks in their careers, they don't know how to ask for help. It's not
Yeah.
something necessarily that we teach, our folks to do well.
Yeah.
And so that could be part of the issues that, folks are facing. But regardless, a toxic environment is when you don't feel supportive, right? And so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to reflect on the importance of asking for help.
Yeah.
The it's If you don't feel safe asking for help, that's a really good sign that things are not
Yeah.
healthy. um it's somewhere, sometimes that's the environment, sometimes that's the person, but um that's so important. And the number one way that I've seen people fail in roles is an inability to ask for help in a timely way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. This is a live session with Ben. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the comments. Or if you're watching this on a replay, let us know that you are watching this on a replay, and then also post your questions. I will find Ben and answer your questions if you have them later on. And then towards the end, I'll also give you guys his contact info so you can feel free to reach out to him directly as well. So as we progress, Ben, tell me some of the outcomes that your program, how long have you working through this coaching, mentoring aspect of your business?
Yeah. I've been doing this as my main job for about a year and a half now.
Okay.
I started taking coaching clients, about several months before I left
Mhm.
Amazon and made this my main thing. Um, and I've seen some amazing shifts and outcomes, both in terms of folks who are just trying to find out what they want in their future. I've seen some surprising turns, some folks who realized that what they really wanted was to not be working for someone else anymore, to start their
Mhm.
own business or to be freelancing or something like that. I've had some folks realize that, or who came to me thinking that they wanted a role transition and realized what they needed was um, a company that helped them do what they do well, um, and that they were just in the wrong place.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and and I've also worked with some folks who are uh, really struggling. Some of the biggest shifts I've seen are when folks come to me and say, "I can get interviews, but I never get offers." Um,
Okay.
a couple of them, after talking to them once or twice, like one or two sessions, they just nailed their next one. It just needed a little bit of shift. Usually the issue is that they hadn't interviewed in several years and they had grown since then, but they were still interviewing like they did when they were fresh out of college. They
Yeah.
were they were entirely focused on tech, and entirely focused on kind of day-to-day responsibilities, and they weren't talking about what they already knew was important. They just hadn't fully recognized that for themselves, but they weren't talking about their influence and leadership and communication and all of that people stuff that becomes more and more important as you get more mature and
Mhm.
senior.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So, you said your coaching is with an emphasis on software developers with ADHD. Can we touch on the ADHD part a little bit?
Yeah.
So, um, tell me why ADHD.
Well, it's because I have ADHD, and I didn't discover that until I was in college. I was on my way to toward failing out and being fired from that testing job. At when I finally sought some help and started learning about what this meant for me, and getting help with that, and recognizing uh, what I was struggling with and starting to look at ways to manage that completely turned my life around. I went from being a terrible student to a passing one, and from a not great employee to a great one. And that it was so life changing for me. But I also recognize that a lot of the advice out there for being more productive and things like that is not very helpful for people with ADHD. It tends to be kind of all at once, or um, it tends to uh, be particularly difficult with folks with ADHD. So I found very early on that talking openly about having ADHD uh,
Mhm.
was something that was really compelling for people who also had ADHD. Even if they're not coming to me to specifically focus on that, it helps to work with someone who understands, and so also understands why some things are work better than others.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some strategies are more likely to be effective than others. And sometimes we have to get really granular with things, whereas somebody without ADHD can maybe take something a little more ambiguous and run with it. Someone with ADHD needs to kind of drill down a little more not take it all as one big thing.
That's really awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that because ADHD, I feel like it's on the rise, and it could just be more awareness now that we just know more now about, the symptoms and how to deal with this, right? It's not something that honestly, growing up, I didn't even know what it was. And I see some characteristics in me that point to I may have it, I don't know. And I won't insult, those that actually are diagnosed because it's a real thing. So it's tough. But recognizing that, you have ADHD or, are on the spectrum somewhere, definitely helps you to get the support that you need, and absolutely helps you figure out how to deal with life, with work, with relationships, right? Because it has such a big impact. Of course, it has nothing to do with tech. And let's get back to tech. One of the questions, Ben, I know it's not something that I asked you to prep for, but one of the questions that I get asked a lot are, okay, so what are the different areas, right? What are the various roles, if you're technical, that you can pursue after, you've done programming, what other areas can you think of or go after and be successful in?
There are quite a few directions, especially, if you want to still lean on that that technical skill, you can still bring that forward in a number of different ways. The TPM role, technical program manager, is a great one if you also have or want to develop the project and program management skills. There are also people who kind of go higher level and do things like take on architect roles. That's pretty common direction for people to go. I've also, a lot of people see this, at least initially, as a step backward, but I don't tend to, and that would be going into things like DevOps and operations kinds of roles, where there's still a lot of technical stuff going on, but it tends to be more ad hoc, less large project. Sometimes folks with ADHD, for example, find that better because the pieces of work tend to be smaller, yet still very technical. And they enjoy having a much clearer sense of exactly what they should be doing in a given day. And yet the problems aren't any less difficult. And I say that as someone who's spent some time in operations and have a lot of respect for that work. Because those are kind of some top of mind things.
So let's say, we have programmers, they want to now go into technical program management or, system architect. Those roles require a specific skill set. So when people come to you and say, hey, Ben, I've got it, I want to be a technical program manager, how do you kind of help them develop their skills to align to those positions?
Well, there's two parts to that. One, the skills are a necessary component, and then of course finding that path to actually get a chance at doing the work. And one of the most successful ways that I've seen for kind of pairing those together is working with a supportive manager, if you're lucky enough to have one, who just being really clear that this is a direction you want to try and explore, and work with them to identify ways that you can start incorporating some aspects of that into your work. That actually tends to be pretty easy with things like TPM, where at least you can start doing more project management, because
Mhm.
In software engineering, everyone needs to be their own mini PM anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
You need to manage your own projects, even if that includes just yourself. There's aspects to that. It's not just coding. You need to have a plan and execute on it. And almost always you're interfacing with other teams or other groups to coordinate, make sure things fit together. A good engineering team manager is going to recognize that getting you experience in joining some of those conversations to start with, and then taking them on your own will be a great way to start building those skills. And even without that kind of support from your leadership, I find that often if you volunteer to be the face of your team to other teams, a lot of the other engineers are going to be like, yes, please, you
yeah,
take those meetings.
yeah.
And even your manager might. And that's a way for you to kind of go after that just by volunteering for some of the work that other folks don't want to do.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that answer, Ben. Thank you. That helps put things in perspective on, what people can expect. So then my next question is who's your target audience? Like, who's the best, who are some characteristics of the best candidates that you want to work with?
Yeah. I think I see the folks that are the most enjoyable to work with and tend to have the best success are folks who are coming to me not saying, what do I do, but saying, I know what I do, or I know how to, I guess to put this another way, I work with really smart people. So I don't tend to spend a lot of time telling them what to do, because they can figure that out, but sometimes they need somebody to figure that out with. And that's where the coaching relationship really shines in my experience, and the folks that I've worked with. And that can be trying to figure out what they want in their career, in that early stage of, I'm unhappy, but I don't know what I want. It can be later saying, I know what I want, I just need to get there, and I need someone to partner with me to do that. Anywhere in that range is great. I'm happy in all of that. But the folks who I work best with are the ones who are also prepared to fully own their role in that, which
Mhm.
is doing the work, making the decisions, and digging deep and getting creative, and just trying stuff. Because that's the other thing. The one of the qualities that shows up a lot in my most successful clients are that they're very experimental. They'll try stuff, see if it works, and if it doesn't, pivot and try something else. And yeah, because that's how
Okay.
everyone's path is a little different. We got to try
Yeah.
a bunch of things.
Absolutely. I think for my coaching program, I teach people how to transition into business analyst, scrum master, and project management roles, right? And so for my target audience, I'm always looking for people that have the domain knowledge, right? So let's say they have experience in healthcare, they have experience in, accounting, they have experience in a particular domain. And what I do is I work with the knowledge that they have and help them transition into these IT roles. Because as you and I know, right, our framework in how we implement projects never changes, right? So I think when I hear you talking about your target audience, it's folks that are technical, they like to be in the technical world, but maybe either defining their role a little bit further or helping them pivot into a different role, right?
Yeah.
A different aspect of their technical skill set that they already have, right? Because it's a great skill set to have, right? They know they love being in that environment, but maybe just something a little bit different that they don't probably or have not had the exposure of, right? Because I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of colleges, you go to YouTube and you say, teach me more about a specific role, and you'll find tons of videos. What I don't think that we do a great job of saying is, well, in this arena, you could be all of these, or in this arena, you could be all of these. So I think a lot of it is for, folks like you and I, because we've been in our environments for so long, right? We know what the different aspects are and what the different roles and the skill sets required for those roles. So I don't know if I summarized that accurately, Ben.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been really interesting to see the backgrounds that people have and what skills and knowledge that has brought to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the really fun people to work with are people with really unusual paths through their past career. People who've done who haven't taken that straight line, and who, as a result, have this really unique fingerprint of experience and knowledge.
Exactly.
And they're trying to find the place where they can make the most use of that. And sometimes that can be hard, but and take some time, but it can be really satisfying when you find like there is somebody who needs, several pieces of that, even if they kind of seem unrelated.
Absolutely. Similar to my program, right? Most of my folks come from healthcare or nursing or accounting. And because they're in that role day to day before transitioning, who best to build systems for nurses, right? Better than a nurse herself, right? So what I try to do is I marry them being a stakeholder or somebody that was at first providing requirements to folks like you and I, to now becoming in that role to interview stakeholders. How better can they interview stakeholders having the domain knowledge, right? So it becomes, it's a perfect marriage. And of course, I'm biased, right? But to me, it's a perfect marriage. Yeah. So my last question to you, Ben, is how can folks find you if they're interested in working with you and interested in learning more about where they can take their career, either in a different company or in a different skill set or role? How can they find you?
Yeah, now the best place to get started is bentobin.com.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'll provide that information. Send me your info and I'll provide it in my links. I don't see any questions right now, but folks, if you're watching this on a replay or watching this live with us, post your questions in the comments, either in our Facebook group or YouTube channel. I'll be posting this on LinkedIn as well. So if you have any questions for Ben and I, please let us know. I will find Ben and have him answer those questions. And then feel free to reach out to Ben as well. This has been a pleasure. I've learned so much myself through this interaction, and I'm grateful for you to have spent time with us this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
I'll see you guys later. Bye, everyone.